Sir?
Yes, Thompson.
We have a question which maybe you'd settle for us.
Be glad to try.
Oh, is it true that a plane will always warn you before it stalls?
Well, yes and no. That depends on what you call a warning. For instance, in a turn, the warning may be much less noticeable and the stall approach more rapidly. Also, you may have an entirely different set of warnings than you'd have in a wing level stall.
And why is the stalling speed in a turn higher?
Now, let's go back to the beginning. You know what angle of attack is?
Yes, sir. It's the difference between the direction your wing is pointed and the direction you're traveling. Now, in slow flight, for instance, you may be traveling a perfectly level course and yet have your wing pointed up like this. So here is your angle of attack, and in this case, it's a fairly large angle.
That's right. Now, do you know the relationship between lift and angle of attack?
Well, when you increase your angle of attack, you also increase your lift, don't you, sir?
That's right. A fairly oversimplified example of that is if you put your hand out of the window of a moving car and tilt it up a little, the wind will try to make it go up. By tilting your hand, you're increasing its angle of attack. And the more you increase its angle of attack, up to a certain point, the more the wind tries to make it go up. In other words, the more lift it has. But in an airplane, the amount of lift you have depends not only on your angle of attack, but also on your airspeed. Cutting down on airspeed at any given angle of attack cuts down on lift. That's why when you go from cruising into slow flight, as you retard throttle, you ease the nose up. By increasing the angle of attack as the airspeed falls off, you keep lift constant and therefore do not lose altitude. With that in mind, let's see what really happens to the airplane when we do a wing level stall. As we lose airspeed, we keep easing the nose up, attempting to maintain altitude until one of two things happens. We finally reach the stalling angle of attack, which means the air is no longer flowing smoothly over the wings and stall. Or if we had simply held the plane at a high angle of attack, without easing the nose up so high as to exceed the stalling angle, the airspeed will drop off to a point where the plane starts to sink. The air would then strike the wings from this direction, and that causes us to exceed the stalling angle. The airspeed at which this happens in the wing level power-off stall is called the normal stalling speed. So when we say the normal stalling speed of a plane is 45 knots, we mean that it takes the maximum angle of attack plus at least 45 knots of airspeed to provide enough lift to support the weight of the plane. Now, we know that in straight and level flight, lift must be exactly equal to weight. Let us assume that we had a plane which weighed 3,000 pounds. Then it would take 3,000 pounds of lift to keep it flying straight and level. The force of lift always works perpendicular to the wings. So when we put the plane in a bank, it is the tilting of this force to one side which causes the plane to turn. Some of this lift is now diverted to start and keep the plane turning. The fact that the plane still wants to go straight ahead creates centrifugal force equal to the turning force. The actual weight of the plane plus centrifugal force results in what is sometimes referred to as apparent weight. It follows that lift and apparent weight must be equal. For example, in a 70-degree bank, apparent weight is about 3 times as great as in level flight. So we have to produce about 9,000 pounds of lift. This requires all the lift we can get from the maximum angle of attack plus an airspeed of not less than 77 knots. In other words, 77 knots is the stalling speed in a 70-degree bank. As we decrease our bank, apparent weight decreases and the stalling speed drops, until in level flight we have apparent weight equal to actual weight and a stalling speed of 45 knots.
I didn't know there was that much to it.
Almost takes a course in aerodynamics to explain it. But it's dope that every pilot should have if he values his neck. On the other hand, that alone won't keep you from stalling out. You can't see your angle of attack, but the feel of the airplane, the way it looks and sounds, will tell you as much about your angle of attack as you would know if you could see it. For instance, as you steepen your bank in a turn, the apparent weight of the plane increases, and the pilot also seems to get heavier. If you were to put a small bathroom scale on the seat of the plane and you sat on it instead of on your parachute pack, you'd find that in the air, in straight and level flight, your weight would be about the same as when the plane is sitting on the ground. But put the plane into a 50-degree bank, and you'll weigh half again as much as you did in straight and level flight. You're putting 1.5 G's on the airplane and on yourself as well. And as you shallow the bank, the excess weight will decrease. Put the plane in a dive. As long as you follow the established course of the dive, your weight will be just about normal. Also, notice that you're flying at very low angle of attack. But pull out of the dive, the sharper your pull out, the more you'll weigh. Also, the sharper your pull out, the greater your angle of attack, and the nearer you are to the stalling angle. So that feeling of heaviness can tell you a lot about your angle of attack. The heavier you feel, the nearer you are to the stall. So we can put down that heavy feeling as a stall warning. It is present only in turns or pullouts and is a warning only for stalls at higher normal speeds. It does not apply to slow speed stalls. The other warnings for stalls at higher normal speed are excessive back pressure and vibration.
Sir, do you mean excessive back pressure on the stick?
That's right. Now, I don't want you to become too conscious of the controls of the plane. But before you stall out at high or normal speed in most airplanes, you'll find that you're pulling back at least fairly hard on the stick. The one exception to that, of course, is when you have the plane trimmed at an excessively nose-high attitude. Now let's compare these warnings with those we get before a stall at slow speeds. Instead of the heavy feeling, you'll get a sinking feeling before the stalls at slow speed, or at least you'll feel a loss of buoyancy. There won't be the excessive back pressure on the stick that you would exert in high or normal speed stalls. Instead, the controls feel mushy. A primary trainer usually develops a sort of shudder before it stalls out at slow speeds. Also, the plane sounds wrong. Sometimes the stall develops so suddenly that unless the pilot is thoroughly alert, he won't have time to recognize the warnings. In a skid or a slip, for example, the stall occurs sooner and is more vicious. Here's why. In balanced flight, the air flows straight back across the wings from fore to aft. If you were to slice through one of the wings on a line following the flow of air, the cross-section would look like this. When you skid or slip, the air travels diagonally across the wing, and the cross-section following the flow of air would look like this. The air has to travel further to get across the skidded wing, resulting in a different type of low-pressure area which doesn't have as much lift. Likewise, since your nose is cocked off your flight path, you are cutting the lift on one wing more than the other. It is as though the airplane had one wing shorter than the other. Of course, until you've had a little more experience, you'll inevitably slip and skid a little. But beware of unbalanced flight at high angles of attack, that is, at slow speeds or in steep or even medium turns.
But, sir, when you use the wing-down method of drift correction, you're actually slipping, aren't you?
Yes, but the amount of slip isn't sufficient to be dangerous at gliding speed and straight flight. Later on, you'll learn to use the slip to boost altitude quickly, much steeper slips than you'd use for drift correction. But you'll learn the feel of that kind of a slip, and you'll learn to balance it in such a way that it becomes a perfectly safe maneuver. So the time to be on the lookout for stalls is when you're flying at a high angle of attack. In other words, when your speed is slow or when you feel heavy in a turn or a pullout. Also, beware of skids and slips.
Slow speed, when you feel heavy, and when you're skidding or slipping a turn, that's when stalls occur. Is that right, sir?
Exactly. And these are the stall warnings. If your angle of attack approaches your stalling angle slowly, you'll usually get lots of warning. The faster it approaches your stalling angle, the shorter will be the period of warning. Skidding and slipping will also shorten the warning period. The way to avoid stalls is to get plenty of stall practice at safe altitudes until your reaction to the stall warnings becomes instinctive. until you're highly sensitive to the conditions under which stalls may occur. It takes all the clues together, the entire sight, sound, and feel of the airplane to tell you what's happening or what's going to happen to the plane. With lots of that kind of practice, plus a thorough understanding of the dope I've tried to give you today, there's no reason why you should ever stall out when you're too low to do anything about it.
This, friends, is Cadet Sylvester McDribble practicing stalls and spins. McDribble, fortunately, has plenty of altitude. That, at least, is according to Hoyle. But see those clouds down there? Clouds mean nothing to McDribble. And so far as any trainers, transports, mountain peaks, or what have you, that might be under the clouds, those are furthest from max thought. Dear, dear. Baffling, isn't it? But look what's under the clouds, all unaware of what's spinning above them. Yes, spinning through clouds is a dangerous business, as those who have tried it and lived will tell you. But for the ungarbled word on stall and spin recovery, suppose we listen in on Flight Instructor Taylor and his student Pete. Like all pilots who yearn to live out their full 60 years and 10, Taylor believes in making sure no other plane is in the way before attempting stalls, spins, or acrobatics. The simplest way to do this is to take a good look at the practice area ahead while climbing out into it. Gentle S-turns make it possible to see the entire area. Then, when you reach the area and have enough altitude, you make whatever additional turns are necessary to be absolutely sure no one is behind or below you. Then, as you're doing your maneuvers, keep an eye out for other planes, so you don't have to spend too much time clearing yourself between maneuvers.
Let take off, and you gradually let the nose get too high. If you're in reasonably well-balanced flight, you'll get lots of warning. The nose looks too high. The engine begins to labor. You have to keep pulling further and further back on the stick to hold the nose up there. And if you're not tensed up on the controls, you'll feel them getting mushy. The plane shudders. You can see the wiring quiver. The plane may mush a little before it stalls. You may get that sinking feeling. And when it does stall, you'll get a sudden mush or jerk, which we call the brake. Then you start to spin. And if when you feel that brake, you react instantly, pushing the nose away from you and easing on full throttle, you can still avoid a spin. But notice that I recover from the stall before recovering from the turn. That is, I push the nose straight away from me and then pick up the wing. Watch. That was a slow-speed stall. The turn, we will not let the nose get too high, but we'll make the turn steeper than a climbing turn should be. As we steepen the turn, you can feel some increase in apparent weight. Also, you'll notice that we're exerting quite a lot of back pressure on the stick. And the plane may vibrate if we approach the stalling angle slowly enough. Now, watch for the brake. We push the nose away from us, apply full throttle, and then pick up the wing. Now I want you to take over and make a level turn to the right.
You have it. Now steepen up your turn and deliberately skid it by adding too much inside rudder. Make the turn steeper and steeper until the plane stalls. And when it stalls, notice that it will spin to the inside of the turn, that is, in the direction of too much rudder. Nice recovery. Now make another turn to the right, but slip it. That is, deliberately use too much outside rudder. Again, make the turn steeper and steeper. And notice that when the plane stalls, it will start to spin to the outside, to the left, in the direction of excess rudder. We call this spinning over the top. In any stall, except when you're inverted, get the habit of instinctively pushing the nose straight away from you and smoothly adding full throttle. In stalls close to the ground, the natural tendency is to want to pull the nose up. Pilots who have recovered successfully from stalls close to the ground will tell you that the hardest thing they ever did was to get the nose down with the ground close below them. Speaking of stalls out of turns, ever hear of the Naval stall? Maybe you've got a girl who lives somewhere out on the edge of town. One day when you're out solo, you decide to disregard the flight rules and go over and buzz Mabel. Of course, you know you'll be washed out if you're caught, but you're feeling pretty cocky, so you fly over and start to circle the house, hoping Mabel will come out and see you. But your circle's a little too big, and you're afraid you'll miss her, or she'll miss you, so you keep steepening up your turn. And pretty soon, sure enough, Mabel comes out and waves at you. But that lower wing gets in the way, so you can't see her. So you apply top rudder to get the wing out of the way. So you pay a call on Mabel, right in her own front yard. Pilots sometimes spin in while flying pylons for the same reason. They concentrate on the pylons to the exclusion of everything else. They lose all consciousness of what the plane is doing. They let their bank get too steep, or they skid or slip without realizing it, and they stall. When we get to steep turns, you'll learn that in entering a gliding turn, the steeper the turn, the more you lower the nose. Why? Well, in a straight glide, like this, your nose is low enough to counteract the drag you have at this angle of attack. You want to keep that same gliding speed in your turn. But drag is so much greater in a steep turn that you have to lower the nose to maintain your speed. However, if you keep on steepening the turn, you will soon reach a point where, even at gliding speed, you will exceed the stalling angle. Just how steep you can make a gliding turn without stalling is something only practice and experience can teach you. Practice at high altitudes in which you train yourself to recognize by the sight, sound, and feel of the airplane just how close you are to the stall. Planes do not stall themselves. They are stalled by the pilot. And, except in the inverted attitude, they stall because the pilot pulls the nose toward himself, either too fast or too much. The exact timing of the two actions, pushing the nose away from you and picking up the wing to relieve the stall, is something you can learn only through practice. Eventually, you'll know by the feel of the plane when the stall has been sufficiently relieved. I've already given you some idea of how valuable rudder control can be when you're stalling the plane for a landing. As we approach this stall, notice that even after the ailerons are completely ineffective, we can still control the wings with the rudders. We're close to the stall now, and the ailerons have almost no effect. But after the plane is completely stalled and starts to fall off on a wing, full opposite rudder will pick up the down wing. As the plane starts to fall off the other way, we apply rudder on the other side. Again, the low wing comes up. We're in a stalled condition and losing altitude fast, but we're keeping the plane from spinning by continually picking up the low wing with rudder. This maneuver is called the falling leap. Later on in the course, you'll learn to do it. In the meantime, it demonstrates a very practical procedure which may save you from ground looping. Sometimes, as you come in for a landing, a wing will drop. You've got to get that wing up or ground loop. Apply quick rudder and the low wing will come up nicely, allowing you to make a normal landing. That procedure is important to know now, but it'll be a lot more important when you get into heavier aircraft later on. So get used to picking up the low wing with rudder when you're close to the stalled condition. Don't attempt to use aileron. That will only aggravate the condition. No matter how familiar you are with stall recovery, there's always a chance that you'll get into a spin. So the technique for spin recovery should be just as instinctive and automatic as stall recovery. Now I'm going to do a spin to the left. Is your seatbelt tight? Okay. We start with a wing level stall. As the plane slows down, we ease the nose up to the 3-point attitude, and just before it stalls, we apply full rudder in the direction we want to spin. In the spin, you're stalled, but you're also rotating. You must stop rotation by using full opposite rudder, and relieve the stall by getting the nose away from you with a positive forward motion of the stick. The instant rotation stops, neutralize your rudder. Then, as you feel the airplane regaining its lift, ease out of the dive. To recover from an accidental spin, you first have to know which way you're rotating. And remember this, the only thing that matters is the way the plane is turning in relation to you. If your nose is turning around to the right, apply full, hard left rudder and push the nose away from you. If the nose is turning around to your left, apply full, hard right rudder, then push the nose away from you. The instant rotation stops, neutralize your rudder. Then, as you feel the airplane regain its lift, ease out of the dive. Your pull-out from the dive following the spin must be properly timed. If you pull out too soon or too abruptly, you will stall again. A stall such as this following a spin is called a progressive stall. It's the stall progressing out of a spin recovery. Another common mistake in spin recovery is failure to neutralize the rudders at the instant rotation stops. This puts you into a skid or slip. Watch. Now, if you combine these two errors, that is, if you pull out too sharply and don't neutralize the rudder soon enough, you're stalled in unbalanced flight, so you're sure to whip off into another spin. And this time, the plane will spin faster and wrap up tighter. The second spin is called a progressive spin because one spin progresses out of the other. But the opposite extreme of pulling out of the dive too soon is waiting too long to pull out. When you do this, you lose a lot of altitude, build up excess speed, so your pull-out has to be more gradual, and you lose still more altitude. You want to get out of your dive as quickly as possible without stalling again. Just how quick that is, only the feel of the airplane can tell you. And you learn to judge this by plenty of stall and spin practice at high altitude. You may get the idea that the yellow peril doesn't spin easily, and if you show reasonable judgment, it doesn't. You can stall it in balanced flight, and oftentimes you'll merely experience a dropping of the nose. Because the yellow peril was designed for the stability and safety primary students need in an aeroplane. But soon you'll be flying advanced trainers, and later service or combat-type aircraft. And in both of these, some of the stability has, of necessity, been sacrificed for speed, long range, and the other characteristics which make each particular type of plane more effective in doing the job for which it was designed. Those aircraft often spin more easily than the primary trainer. There's often less warning of an approaching stall. So, the more you learn about stall warning, stall, and spin recovery in the primary trainer, the better you'll be able to cope with stalls and, if necessary, spin in the more advanced type planes you'll be flying a little later on.